Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this third session of our training series, Managing Technology Change Projects for Business People. My name is Alan Reed, and I'm a director of Get Savvy. This session tackles two topics that are shockingly neglected during projects, resulting in poor outcomes for the project and reduced benefits. The first topic we're tackling is change management and what we usually call the people side of projects. And the second is benefits management, which is tools and techniques for ensuring the project delivers on what was promised during the business case. In other words, we're tackling some of the biggest misperceptions in technology projects, which is that the goal of the project is to replace system A with system B. And what we want to do is get across that while the technology has to work, it's far from the goal of the project. And if you don't focus on the topics we're covering today, there's a reasonable chance your entire project may be deemed to have failed. So let's make sure that doesn't happen to you. Okay, so let's carry on from there. Before we get started, my name's Alan Reed. I'm a director of Get Savvy. And please don't worry about writing loads of notes. We're going to be sending you comments and the entirety of the presentation and the video after the webinar. So please just let it absorb you as you go through. We like to encourage people to ask questions in the Q&A box. So anything that resonates with you. So we'll be tackling things like what happens if people ignore you on your project or the management team aren't supportive. If that's happening with you, drop it into the Q&A and we'll tackle that during the webinar. And then finally, the content of this webinar is taken from our free training from our training series, which is also called Managing Technology Change Projects for Business People. We've tried to make that training course as near free as we can. So a 1 month access is £90. 3 months access is £180. Delegates on this webinar will receive a 50% discount even on that. So please make sure you try and get some support for your project and get yourself some vital training to make sure your own project goes as well as possible. Okay, so let's carry on from there. Tiny bit about us. We've, as well as our training platform, providing project management guidance in an AI-driven, self-paced way. We also provide direct project assistance to people where you're starting to structure your own project or you need guidance on your own project. We're religiously, fiercely independent of any technology or provider, so we're able to provide guidance across the entire technology landscape in the interest purely of the client. We work on projects in lots of different ways. So sometimes we help at the beginning, structuring a project. Sometimes we help all of the way through. Sometimes we help when people say, "Oh, something isn't going wrong, isn't going right. What can we do about that to make it better?" All right. With all of that, let's get into the content. So the first thing to say is that the goal of this session is to put you in the driving seat as a project manager. So please imagine that the challenges we're talking about today are your challenges and how you might go about trying to resolve those challenges in your own project and use the tools and techniques that we're talking about today. So in your role as project manager, of course, you need to be organized on the sake of, or for the sake of the project. You need to think about preparing your organization, building your team, and getting support. One of the key things we always say is you must do as a project manager is don't try and do everything yourself. One of your main techniques is to share the problem with your wider organization. And then, of course, part of that sharing the project and sharing the challenges is reporting regularly to your management team and other stakeholders so that they can then assist you with resolving them. That's the role of management when it comes to your project. And then finally, applying a combination of those things along with the things that we're talking about today to make sure that you get the best out of your project and what you need to deliver. Okay, so please put yourself in the driving seat and think about you in the role of guiding or supporting or managing your own project. So what we're tackling today are these two areas here. And essentially, change management and benefits management, we're talking about them now because they're things that must be reflected in the implementation. So as you'll hear us say, essentially there's a real temptation with the implementation just to get on with the technology side of the project. And if you forget the people side and you forget why you're doing the project in the first place, then you can essentially end up with a project that, yes, the technology has swapped, but you're not seeing anything useful out of it at the end of it, and people are still working in the ways that they were working before. So let's get into the first of those things. So change management. Again, imagining that you yourself have been put in a position where you have to drive through a project, and that project is going to require considerable change from people on the ground in how they work, maybe people outside your organization and how they engage with you. So how are you going to get the best out of that? So let's look at first of all how you might start preparing. We love a checklist. So this is the kind of thing that you have to start thinking about before you get into the implementation project. So understanding what change management is, a large part of getting change management to succeed is recognizing that you are not the boss of everyone in the organization. You can't demand that people change. So therefore, we will often refer to the fact that you have to get senior management to buy in to the concept of change management in order for you to have a fighting chance of making it work. How do you get started? How do you make it work on the ground at different phases of the project? And how do you monitor and check that? So that's what we're getting into. So the first part of it is understanding what change management is. So essentially, it's the things that you do before your project and during your project to make sure that the eventual users of your project, the stakeholders, are going to actually get the benefits out of it, and you're going to have a reasonable degree of take up, and you're going to have positive outcomes from that. So the challenge tends to be making it stick. So a lot of talk is given to change management at the beginning of projects. Everyone says, yes, we must be very positive, and yes, we must have users on board all of the way through. And the challenge tends to be that actually that all gets thrown under the bus as soon as you get into the meat of the project, and there are technical difficulties, budgetary difficulties, time difficulties, and then all of those things tend to get forgotten. So how do you make it stick? How do you make it part of how people are going to work on an ongoing basis after the project is finished? So that's what we're going to talk about. So why do so many projects struggle with change management? Let's talk about that a little bit, because one of the saddest comments I ever heard when getting involved in a project salvage project some years ago, things had gone horribly wrong. People were not happy. People were being very blamey and shouty at each other and at the supplier. And the comment that really stuck with me was someone saying, we forgot our users all of the way through the project. So in response to the question, what went wrong, and when did it start to go wrong? That was part of the answer. We forgot our users all of the way through the project. And the consequence of that was that when they got to the go live point, it's not an overstatement to say it was a disaster, full of complaints, people not knowing how to use the system, people forgotten everything that they'd ever been taught, and not comfortable with how to do their business processes in the job. And of course, they then presumed it was all the fault of the project and all of the fault of the software. So this happens over and over again, and this is where the project team will focus on the technology challenge or get into a huddle with the supplier, and then expect users to change everything they do after a tiny bit of training right at the end. So let's see what we can do to make sure that that doesn't happen. And essentially, the way of making sure it doesn't happen and make sure that you don't end up in the failure category with your own project is to build your users into the center of your project. That's in its simplicity. And also to recognize, as we say here, that building your users into the center of your project and doing user-focused activities all of the way through your project is time consuming. It takes resource. what you have to do as part of recognizing the importance of this and avoiding the problems that will come out of it is recognize that resource is going to be required, that resource must be protected, and that it has to be done all of the way through the project in conjunction with all of the technical issues that have to happen on a software project. So essentially, it's a consistent focus on users every week and every stage of your project all of the way through. And that's really hard to do. It's really hard to keep that focus, and it's really hard to devote the resource to doing it. So, how do you then make sure that you're not doing this alone and that your organization is on board with you? So, first of all, recognizing with change management that a large part of it, we're talking about people, we're talking about how they work, they're talking about preferences and people being busy and all of those things. So that has to be recognized right at the beginning. So there's a cultural framework within every project, within every organization. So we say here that there can be resistance to change, and that resistance to change isn't people literally saying, go away, I don't want to change anything in my role." It's more commonly manifested as, "I'm really busy and I can't have all of this extra stuff on top of my day job. We've got the annual conference, so leave me alone for 6 months." So all of that has to be recognized right at the beginning, so that you can start to do something about it before the project starts. And a large part of that is buy-in. You can't do a project at people, you have to do a project with people. And to do that, you need their intellectual and emotional buy-in to why this is going to make a difference to them. You have to explain why it's going to make a difference at an organizational level, yes, but also at a team level and at an individual level, so that they will be better off with this project and by putting time into this project. So part of it is also being frank about changes to working practices that are going to come out of it. Trying to assuage people's concerns that it's going to be too threatening and too frightening, and then making sure that they're understanding all of that. And so a common misperception again on projects is that you can tackle all of that by simply sending a newsletter out every 2 weeks on your project. And the reality is we find that's ineffective. So communication has to happen in a very, very different way. It has to be two-way, where you're listening to people. And of course, you have to recognize people aren't reading your emails, so you have to do things like involve them in meetings, do workshops, lunch and learn, town hall meetings, etc. We'll talk about all of that. Okay, so the 6 benefits of change management. I've actually put these here so that you can use them when you're presenting it or talking about this to your management team, because the reality is that the benefits of change management are just so inarguable. You're preventing the money you're spending on the project being wasted. So this project is going to be seen as expensive. It always is for every organization. So you're preventing it being wasted and having a poor outcome out of it by doing these activities here. You're also making sure that the organization is going to get more benefit from the money that is spent. And a key point we try and get across is that the only source of benefits when it comes to a technology project is the degree to which people will change how they work. So changing a system from system A to system B, as I've said, is not the goal of a project, and it's not where you will get your benefits. The benefits can only come from people being able to work more effectively, people being able to engage more effectively with you as a result of this project. So when you start to put that in front of the management team and say, look, there's real cash money involved in doing change management properly throughout the project, then you can start getting the support and the resources that you require in order to make it happen. Because if you're going to do weekly activities all of the way through the project to engage with people, then essentially what you need to be able to do is get support for that resource, get support for the time that you need to do in addition to the workload on the actual project itself. Sorry, I've just had a message saying that some people can see me twice on it. So let me try and just readjust the share and see what we get. 1 second. Okay, I hope that's better on the sharing. Okay, so let's go through from there. Okay, so what I'd like to talk about here is our six-phase change management methodology. So that sounds a little bit overblown, but let me just make the point that there are some really important but childishly simple methods that you should use to make sure that you're getting your colleagues on board with the project, that people are supporting you when you're going around trying to introduce the benefits of the project, and that people are on the same page. So the first one we talk about is aligning your senior management team. That's just the recognition of the fact that you need resource, you need money, you need support, you need them to go and tackle resistance with you. You cannot be doing those things with yourself. If you don't feel that your senior management are on the same page with you as far as all of that is concerned, then you ideally would stop until that has been addressed and that clarity is there. So the second part of it is with this resource that you have, which might be just somebody supporting you on the project, or actually is someone from senior management helping you with communications. Then you can start forming, using those resources and agreeing who's going to do what to keep that communication going, to keep that buy-in going throughout the project. Then the next part of it is identifying all of your different groups within your project, and saying, right, this team here, like let's say they're the middle managers, they only need to know what's going on, and they need to be really good at querying in the system. How do we get them, to be really good at that so that they're feeling positive about the project? This other group over here needs to be really good at this other stuff. How do we make sure that they're getting that? We know this group here are super busy. How do we manage to work with that group to get the best out of them? And you turn all of that into a plan of activities that you're going to do throughout the project, and then you execute in 5 and 6. You execute that plan of activities, always with a view to, okay, how is this going to persist into the project after the project is finished? So that's what the execution and transition to business as usual looks like. So let's go through that and talk a little bit about the detail of that. So um, I've talked a lot about the senior management team, but first of all, you've got to make that case with them. But then you've got to test it in reality, and that means saying, "Listen, I need you to be sending out this email. I'll draft it for you. We need to make it clear to people that they don't really have a choice about supporting this project. It's an organizational goal. They're expected to support it, and I need you to be saying that, please. I need you to be attending this meeting with me, please." And I need you to help me tackle this or that director that is saying they're too busy to do anything for the next N months. So it's that support on the ground that really matters, as well as buy-in and resource. Forming your team. So look, I understand the reality for many people on this call that you might be the only person who is driving this through. It might be that you've been tasked with doing a project and you don't have a half a dozen people to work with you on the project management team. The key thing to understand is the roles, whether it's one person doing it or it's spread across multiple people, the role is still there. So if you're the project manager and you're the change lead, well, the role is still there. So that means it's more important than ever to go and get more support from the senior management team. Consider if you can rope in somebody from marketing, for instance, to help you with communications. And then, of course, you can bring in people from outside the project to be representing different staff areas, and ideally engage with someone outside the organization so that you're getting that vital feedback long before your project is delivering things to people. Mapping all of your stakeholders is just a case of putting things into a table and saying, this is what they need. In an ideal world, this is what I would be able to do with this group to get them on board, to tackle their concerns, to make sure they have enough exposure so that we don't have a whole series of problems later. The communications plan is essentially taking those stakeholder groups, taking what you want people to understand, and then plotting it out week by week, maybe on a rolling 3 months ahead of how you're going to engage with people. So part of it is, first of all, engaging the types of communications. So as I've said, we find that people just are not reading your emails. It's just a grim reality you have to accept. So ask, can I attend this or that meeting that you're already having with your team, so I can explain what's going on the project and why it's going to benefit them and what we need from them. Can we create separate meetings? So the more face-to-face and the more meeting-oriented stuff you have, the better people will understand. Someone on a recent call was talking about the fact that they will just phone up the team lead and say, I understand you're busy and struggling. How can we help? How can we work through this together? And that kind of human level really makes all of the difference, and making sure that you're saving yourself time from tackling problems later. Okay. Continuing staff training or continuing staff engagement. It really is as simple as recognizing that instead of doing the traditional old-fashioned thing on projects, which is ask people what they want in month one, and to create your requirements document, ignore them for a year while you go off and deploy that new supplier and technology, and then ask them, all right, here's a half a day of training, now get on with it. And then with disasters, engage at every stage of the project so that you're not having that problem, and that essentially every week of the project you're finding um, that the staff are aware of what's going on and they've had as much exposure to the system, and any questions and concerns you've had all of the way through are actually there, and getting addressed early. And then that whole transitioning into business as usual, it really is again that thing of, let's not just do everything in isolation and then go ta-da at the end. You've got the best people who know about business as usual are your team leads, are your users, and talking to them all of the way through every week of your project about how this is going to work for them, is going to avoid all of those surprises and horrors later and get people very supportive of the project instead. So let's talk about a really common challenge that people have. That you can see in the picture here, that people are vitally interested in the project, and they're all keen to do a lot of work for you. So the reality, of course, is that a lack of engagement is a really common challenge. Everyone's really busy getting on with their day job. You're the one with project somewhere in your job title, and so they think it's all to do with you and nothing to do with them, and they'll just kind of hide from it and ignore it, and do it very minimally. And of course, if you allow that to persist, you're going to have all of the problems that we've been talking about, and you'll get the blame for it. So how do you tackle that? If people are just not responding, maybe not even attending meetings, or saying go away, I'm busy, or not doing their follow-up actions, there's a loads of ways you can see that this lack of engagement is taking place. So again, you're not everybody's boss. So you have to go back to your senior management team to say, look, people are not understanding this is an organizational goal. That's your job to make sure they do understand it is an organizational goal. And I need your support in reinforcing that. I need to borrow your authority as I'm going around talking to people. Secondly, changing the type of communications. If people are ignoring your emails, don't send more emails. That's not the solution. So piggyback on existing meetings, ask for additional meetings with the senior management team copied in when you're asking the team leader for this kind of thing. And at those meetings, ask for feedback. Tell them what's going on, tell them about the benefits to them, and ask for any concerns or anything people are worried about, and make sure people understand that really you don't have a choice in very subtle language, and that this is actually going to benefit you as well. And then, of course, what we find is really important is to create channels where people can ask questions to you offline. So that could be as simple as a spreadsheet, or it can be an email inbox, or any number of ways where people can ask questions that they're concerned about. And you'll find very often these are very useful questions, things that are a safety net to you that you might otherwise have forgotten. But your contract back to them is everything you ask, we will respond to. Whether that's going to come later or we'll address that as part of the training, but you will respond to everything that comes up. Okay. So then a traditional, really common other thing that happens in the real world all the time, people are saying, okay, project sounds marvelous, but we're just so busy, we can't do anything with it. So, I'm sure you know what you're doing. Um, and then the problem is, again, that you're there to facilitate this project. You're going to, in many cases, go at the end of it and do another project, or get back to your day job. So people need to understand that this is about them and how they're going to be changing working. So getting people to understand this is very beneficial to you, but also conversely, if you don't put enough time into getting what you want, you're not going to get what you want. And it's no good complaining later when the supplier is doing something else and the money has been spent and all of those kind of things. So it's really vital for them to have that sense of ownership. Um, then we find as well, it's very important to get the supplier not just to be talking to the project team, to be talking to the wider stakeholders, so they can see, oh, right, this is what I'm going to be able to do. This is how it's going to work for me. And then, of course, you have to be flexible. Within limits, you have to manage the project workload along with their workload. But in reality, part of what you're saying has to have a subtext of you don't really have a choice about this. The management team have made it clear you have to do this. So let's try and work it out between us, because I don't want to have to go and escalate it because you're going to end up having to do it anyway. Finding different ways of saying that is equally as important. And if they really are resisting, remember, it's not just your problem; it's an organizational problem, and you have to treat it that way. Okay, so summary really quick. So it is about making the people who are paying for the project, in effect, or responsible for the project, or the senior management team, and making sure that they're on board so that they will help you deliver the change management benefits. It doesn't just happen by itself. You need resource, you need activity every week. And if you're not putting those things in, do not be surprised if the go live and people using the system is very minimal. And then it has to be something that's built into your project plan. So every week, along with your technical activities of configuration and integration, you're putting stuff, all right, this workshop, this group, these conversations, this training session, and that way you're making sure that when you get to your go live, it's not the enormous surprise and shock and horror and risk of failure that it might otherwise be. Okay, so again, with you as the project manager, here is a checklist that we think that you should absorb to make sure that your change management side is working well. So, do you have the resources? Have you got a plan? Have you put those things into the plan and plotted it through the project? Senior management again, and making sure that that is all part of everything you're doing on the project with the users at the center. So if you can tick all of those boxes, then you're starting to be in good shape. Thanks a lot for that. Okay, so moving on from there, we then get to the Q&A. Just going to take one Q&A question as we're here. We've had a really good Q&A question through, which is, does change management differ between a waterfall or agile project management approach? I would say the principles do not differ. Which is that you're putting your users at the center of your project. And you're making sure that you've got some resource who's going to focus on users through the project, and that you're doing change management activities all of the way through. So the principles of what you must do not differ, I would argue, no matter what the change management methodology you're using. The how could vary slightly as part of waterfall or change management. So with a waterfall style project, you might have, as part of your change management activities, we've now finished this phase here and it's all locked and loaded and we're all done and we're not going to go back to it. Can we just get some feedback and make sure everyone understands that? In an agile methodology, of course, things are continuously moving and migrating and changing and being adapted. So there's a little bit less of a kind of we've done this when we're on to the next thing element of there. But that's a great question. Thank you very much. So the foundations, the really simple foundations of getting resource, putting users at the center of your project, and making sure you're doing something every week for your users is the same, no matter what your methodology is. Great, thanks so much for that. Please do drop your own questions into the Q&A as we go. Okay, on to the next part of it, which is benefits management, otherwise known as please don't forget what the hell we're doing this project for. And we have to talk about this because so often people do. They forget what they're doing the project for. They imagine that, again, that it's to change technology system A to technology system B, and then they act all surprised when people say, "Well, people are still working outside the system in spreadsheets. Our external users are still complaining that they can't find anything on the website." We're actually just spending more time now trying to cope with the new system. So yes, you've changed technology system A to technology system B, but you haven't had all of the benefits you promised when you were asking for the money or when your project sponsor was asking for the money. So how do we make sure that doesn't happen? So let's go through and we'll talk about what we mean by benefits management on the ground, who's responsible, how to bring it about in real life, and then another checklist because we love a checklist. Okay, so benefits management is essentially how you're going to ensure that all of those wild promises that were made when you were asking for the project budget or when someone was asking for the project budget, if you inherited it later, are actually delivered as part of the project. So it's a process of actively looking at what those benefits are supposed to be, not forgetting them until you right to the end after go live, looking at them through the project, and then putting a plan in place to make sure that they do actually happen. So alongside your change management activities, you've got your, okay, how are we going to make sure that our users can do this better than they could before, that our external stakeholders could do that better than they could before? And the part of it is, of course, the whole point of it, of running the project, is to deliver these benefits. We can't say this often enough and loudly enough. If you somehow manage to get to a go live, and you get into this mind state of a project, very often happens all the time, where all you're thinking about is, I need to get out of live. I need to get to the go live without it falling over on the technology, and therefore I've now delivered the project. And the reality with that is, of course, that somebody somewhere is going to say, well, hold on a minute, we spent all of this big sum of money to deliver A, B, and C, and you haven't delivered A, B, and C. Therefore, the project has failed. And we found over many years, the only way of making sure that that doesn't happen is to put benefits alongside the project plan right from the beginning. Don't do it as an afterthought. Don't just hope for the best that it's going to come out of the simple reality of changing from an old system to a new system. That is not going to deliver the benefits. So the two main challenges if you're responsible for benefits on a project are these. So imagine, again, somebody has promised all of these benefits as part of getting this money and putting all of this time and resource in. But your challenge is to deliver those benefits. And here's the first part of the challenge. Benefits are typically delivered over a period of time, and many of them are delivered after the go live is finished. You can't be saving staff time until they've got the new software available to them. You can't be improving navigation and online self-service until the new website is live, and so on. And because those things can't be experienced until after go live very often, they so often get neglected as something, oh, we'll think about that after go live, by which time it's too late, by which time all of the things that would put the benefits in place and make sure they happen have already happened. And you've got the choice of spending all the money again or running the project again to get them. So what do you have to then do? You have to recognize as well that the reason that benefits get neglected is the same thing that change management gets neglected. People focus on the technology and they ignore the reality of why the project is being executed in the first place. So what happens is that you're getting into this huddle with the supplier always, oh, there's a problem with the data migration, there's a problem with this integration, or this budget is increasing in this area, and then the reality then becomes what we're ignoring is the much bigger risk that the entire budget for this project can end up being wasted because we're not getting the positive outcomes, or the substantial chunks of it can be wasted. We're getting a poor level of positivity and benefits from the project at the end. So, how do I know what benefits my project is supposed to achieve? This is a really straightforward one in many ways. First of all, the benefits a project is supposed to achieve should be in the case for getting the funding for the project. So we're doing this because we want to achieve A, B, C, and D. Well, those are your benefits for the project, and of course there can be additional ones that didn't make the cut in the business case. So then, what type of benefits are there? Usually and typically in a project. So mostly they're monetary and non-monetary. Most of them are non-monetary, to be clear, which means it doesn't mean they're any less important. They can be just as important. So saving staff time, single view of the truth for when it comes to looking at a member or a supporter, more streamlined business processes, more decision support information for the senior management team. There's all of these kind of benefits. And the key thing is to identify what they are, what you're on the hook for delivering, because let's make it personal, let's make it about you, and then doing things to make sure that you don't then get blamed for not delivering those things and that your project actually does deliver them. So, who's responsible for delivering project benefits? This is a kind of subtle one. The reality is, as we say here, you're going to be off this project at some point, and the project benefits are only going to come in after the go live. So the reality is that the delivery of project benefits has to be a partnership between you and the business people. We call them business area leads, could be team leaders, people responsible for an area. It could be the key user in a particular team. It has to be a partnership between you and them, in order to agree that actually, you know what, you business person using the system, only you can really judge and make sure that this benefit happens. And it's only going to happen if you put the time in to tell me, where it's working for you and where it's not working for you, and then we can do something about it to make sure that you're getting this benefit out of it all of the way through. So again, don't be the Lone Ranger. You have to get these people's time, and you have to say to them, look, this is what you're supposed to get out of this. Let's work together to make sure that you do. And if it doesn't feel like you're getting that, let's respond to that early. And that partnership element is an absolutely crucial part of achieving those benefits. So, how to safeguard the benefits while running your project? We've talked a lot about the technical side will often suck the energy, oxygen out of a project. So how do we make sure that you're not experiencing that all of the time? So first of all, creating your benefits plan. I'd be willing to bet that the great majority of the people on this webinar have never created a benefits plan, because the great majority of people on projects don't do it, and that's a large part of why benefits then fail to get realized when they should be, and people have to go back later and spend extra money against extra complaints and lots of negativity to get them recognized at some point in the future, if they ever get recognized. So creating a benefits plan is as simple as saying, right, here's what all of the wild promises we gave when we started this project. Here's a list of them. Here's what it means on the ground if that project, if that benefit is going to be delivered, and here is how I'm going to make sure it does get delivered. Here are the things I can do with these users, or with these teams, and with these external stakeholders, to make sure that each one of these benefits is going to be delivered. And here's how I'm going to tell if it's not being delivered through the project. Now, we're going to give you a template benefits plan as part of attending this webinar, as part of our follow-ups. But it's on you to put the time in to actually put some thought of it, and then of course to live with it all of the way through the project. So as well as creating the idea, great ideas, build it into your plan so that every week and every month you're doing things. And then keeping that focus on. It's the easiest thing in the world to start off with all of these good intentions, and then of course the time goes away. And if that's happening, you have to go back to your management team and say, listen, we're really struggling to keep the focus on these things, and these things, because we just don't have enough time in the day. Share those problems early. It's not your fault. It's only your fault if you fail to tell people where you're struggling for this kind of thing. So these 3 steps sound childishly simple. So few people do them, and that's where they trip up. Okay. Um, They don't just happen. Summarizing it really quickly. So I would say a solid kind of 7 out of 10 projects that get run, particularly where they're organization-wide projects, probably deliver a substantial chunk less of the benefits than they should do. And it's just this recognition. They don't just happen by themselves. They need resource. They need focus all of the way through. They need planning all of the way through. And it needs to be something that's discovered and discussed at each stage of the project so that actually you're hearing early if there are problems. And then, of course, you're talking to people all of the way through to make sure that they're in a position to experience these benefits on the ground as part of the transition to a new business as usual, to a new way of working after the project has gone live. Okay. So again, with a checklist, we find it's your best friend for making sure you have a good outcome. As part of making sure that your benefits realization checklist happens, first of all, then it is making sure that you're going back to your business case and saying, right, here's what we promised, here's what we are on the hook to deliver, and this is what we've agreed with the management team as part of this project. We've then turned that into a benefits plan that says, all right, if we're promising that people the website is going to be better for navigation and people will be able to find content better. How are we going to make sure that's happening? How are we going to find out months before go live if it's not happening? And that goes into your benefits plan, and making sure then that building in set pieces like okay, senior management team. Here is a benefit plan. I'm presenting it to you as part of the early project preparation. You'll notice in here I've said how we're going to do these things a lot. And I've said what we're going to do if they don't materialize. You'll notice that I've put your names against a number of the items on here as my remediation resources or my resources to explain why these benefits must be achieved and to what we're going to do about it if they're not. So again, those kind of set pieces of presenting it and sharing it, we find make a big difference on the ground. You'll also get credit, by the way, because if the wider stakeholders a bit further removed from the project can see that all of this thinking is going on, it reflects well on you. You know, you look like you're doing it properly. You look like you're thinking ahead. Okay, so great. Another question's come into the Q&A. Thank you. Please drop in your own questions. If, for instance, your senior management team are not responsive and don't think it's anything to do with them, you can vent to your fellow stakeholders. We won't tell anyone. Okay, so moving on from there. I've got some really good questions on the Q&A, so I'm just going to tackle those if I may. Please carry on dropping into the Q&A. Really happy to do that. So um, here's a really good one, which is how do you measure some of the more vague benefits, like fairer, more transparent decision making, people being more agile? That's a really good one, and I love the kind of the vagueness of the example that you've given. How we're expecting fairer, more transparent decision making as part of this project. So. When it comes to those kind of soft benefits, and I think the most important benefits are often soft benefits from this kind of project. The key thing that you would try and establish is exactly as you say. How do we measure that? What's the problem that we've got at the moment, and then what would we expect to see if we were seeing less of that problem? And some of the most common tools and techniques are asking people about the problem before the project starts. How does it manifest itself? What does it mean on the ground to you? And then what would it look like if you didn't have that problem anymore? So in that, to tackle that, the example you've given directly, someone saying, we're expecting fairer, more transparent decision making as part of the project. Well, part of that is a technical thing, you could say. Um, Better decision making can come from better informed decisions. So better data coming out of the system, better business intelligence, better understanding of what's going on the ground, the factors that inform your decision. The more transparent decision making could be that everyone can see these metrics that are driving the decisions because it's now shared in the system and people can see it on the ground. And of course, there's the human side of it as well. Somebody's got to decide to make it more transparent and decide to share how this decision was made. But the key thing in terms of benefits management with these softer benefits is to record, okay, what are people saying the problem is now? How does it manifest itself? What would it look like if there was less of it? And then are we seeing that as part of the project so that we can then take action if it's not? Thank you for that very subtle question. I appreciate that. Um, uh, so another one is saying, I've not heard you mention benefit owners during the project. We get much better results by establishing ownership during the project. I love that question. Thank you very much. So yes, what we talk about on this session, of course, there's only so much we can cover in an hour, is a partnership between the people who are responsible for pushing the project along and making sure it gets done and delivered, and the business, the eventual people who are intended to take on the project and benefit from the project. And what we've said here is it has to be a partnership for doing that because the project team can't do it. You're not everybody's boss, but we absolutely love the idea of making assigning benefit owners. So, for instance, you could assign the membership manager or the events manager this particular benefit to make sure that they're part of the picture of getting it achieved. And we absolutely love that idea. So thank you very much for saying that in the question. And that works really, really well on the ground. It helps make the benefit real. So you're having a conversation with the membership manager saying, okay, one of the benefits that's been promised out of this is a more streamlined joining process, for instance, just to take a kind of practical example. So we think we can deliver this by doing A, B, and C. And what your team should see is this D, E, and F as that happens, and as we pretend to be a member joining online, and then they should see this. So how we're going to measure and manage that is at this date we'll be doing this, at that date we're doing that, and then we'll get feedback from you. Is it really happening or not? And if your stakeholders within the membership team are not engaging, then we're going to, obviously you're going to be involved at every step, and you're going to be making sure that that happens. And if you're not happy that that benefit's been delivered, then we are going to talk. You and I are going to talk about making sure that we're doing everything we need. So thank you for that. We really like how we do that. And one of the columns you'll see in the benefits plan, by the way, is that we're providing is who owns this benefit. So, who's my partner for delivering this benefit. So a vital point. Thanks for illustrating that. So. Then we've got another really good question, which is how might you address the challenges of project owners and sponsors in cases where they don't appear to understand why projects have been initiated or need to be created? Okay, that's an interesting one. So the project owner and the project sponsor should, in an ideal world, be the person who did initiate the project, who did say, I think we need to make this change. We're struggling in this way. We're years behind this, or we could be better in that. I do accept, however, that often somebody inherits the role of project sponsor. So maybe somebody has started the project. The CEO has said we need to do this and done some initial stages and said, right, you are now the project sponsor for this. I think the point there has to be that going back to the shared problem, if you're working with a project sponsor who doesn't really seem to understand what the project is about, why it's so important, I literally had a board of trustee member the other a month or so ago saying, why do we need an integrated membership management system and website at all? It seems to be very expensive and an awful lot of trouble. And there was a kind of slightly sarky response from someone else saying, "Oh well, we could just write our data on the wall with a charred stick if that's what you want." But a less kind of heated response might have been explaining the why the project matters strategically to the organization, why it matters in business terms, not in technical terms or just bits and bytes. Um, this is why it's strategically important to us as a business. Um, it's why we've put a business case together that says we're going to spend this money and go through all of this hassle to do this. And why this is going to enable us to do A, B, and C. And if we don't do this, it will hinder us in doing D, E, and F. So put it in a business context, in a strategic goals context, and why it really matters to the organization. And then we found that is what starts to resonate with some people. If all else fails, then it has to be a wider management team conversation. If you're finding that this individual um, project sponsor is not getting it for some reason or doesn't understand their role for some reason, then it essentially then taking it to the wider management team and having a wider conversation about it, so that they really don't understand. It's not just them doing that. Okay, we've had some questions come through before the webinar. So let me just tackle one or two of those. We've only got a minute or two left. So one question, and in fact, this was asked by more than one person. What do I do about change in benefits management if it's just me? If basically this is seen as a very low budget project, I'm the only person working with the supplier. So that's quite a common challenge. We do see that a lot of the time. So the first thing that we say that you must recognize is that you can only do what you can do. So it's no good talking about all of these things that are going to consume all of your time if you don't have the time. So recognize there's a limit to what you can do in reality. And don't feel it's your responsibility. If the organization's put you in a position where there's two persons' work to do every week and you're only one person, then that's not your responsibility ultimately. Your responsibility is to get the best out of that situation and inform the organization what you can and cannot do. So where you do find you're in that situation, the main thing that we suggest very clearly is do put some time in self-defense in your own interest early on, to go back to the management team and say, listen, this is what we should be doing in reality. We should be doing these activities which will consume this amount of time, and here are the positive outcomes from doing that, and here are the negative outcomes from not doing that. We don't have the resource to do it. I'm not trying to invent resource I don't have. So either we accept these risks, or I'm going to need some help, or we're going to need to delay things, or we're going to need to do things differently. But the main thing is to share the problem, to be incredibly transparent about it, and make sure that you're not just taking it on as you're the only person who can do anything about that. So that's one of the most common questions we get, and I hope it's helpful to hear about that. Okay, I'm just going to move on from there. We've only got a minute or so left, so let's go through. So first of all, the next thing that I'm just going to give you a teaser for the next session, which is about managing the implementation and go live parts of the project. That's coming up next week. So if you've done all of the things that we've said earlier, and you've got your planning in place and your resources in place and the management team are on board, then you're starting to be in good shape for the implementation, the longest phase of the project, the time where most things can go wrong, if you like, but at least you set up a very solid foundation to make sure it's going to go well. So I'd just like to wrap up by saying thank you very much for everyone for attending. We're going to provide everything to you, so I hope that's helpful. We'll get that to you over the next day or so. Please take advantage of your 50% discount, an early test of your management team's support for you. If you can't get a little bit of really inexpensive training and support, then there's a signal there somewhere. And then we'll provide the job aids and templates to you. So we're providing our communications plan that's drawn from the course, and we're also providing our benefits plan so that you can see what you should be doing and then start to put that in place, even if you're midway through a project. Okay, we're also going to invite you to the Dear Savvy community, which is where people can vent and share problems, and we share solutions of common project management challenges that people have in the real world on their own projects. And then finally, we look forward to seeing you at the next session next week, same time, which is all about how you implement, make it happen on the ground, and then transition into your new world with all of these changes having successfully taken place. So with that, I'd just like to thank everybody. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for your questions, and really look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you.